You're listening to Not Good Enough, an inadequate response to inadequate responses. I'm Tom McLean, and today I'm here with...
Mitch Alexander.
Tom Lang.
And I'm Evie.
And we've got our producer Isaac here as well. Quick little thing of news. Australia's still on fire. Mm-hmm. Not as much, though. A lot of stuff is contained in New South Wales. That's really nice. Queensland is still pretty on fire, but it seems like they're more on fire every year than anyone realises.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of fun.
Queensland didn't used to be a bushfire state, and now it very much is.
Yeah.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Queensland did not, like, fires...
It's all like rainforest.
Exactly. Fires used to be a thing very much in the southern states where it's a lot drier and it has that different kind of habitat. Queensland was, you know, they'd get fires, but they weren't a big bushfire kind of place. Now they are.
Yeah. So that's hopeful.
That's the thing.
Queensland coming into the 21st century.
I didn't know about that.
So we got a bunch of stuff we want to hit pretty hard this week, so let's just hit it.
I want to talk about climate change. What? Surprise. You might have heard that the government has been saying a bunch of shit. So let's get into that. So we're still signed up to the Paris Agreement, which is very awkward for the government because they really, really, really like fossil fuels.
They also really like emulating America with them. Well, they got to quit the Paris Agreement.
Well, they haven't quit yet.
America hasn't quit.
No, they get the option to quit shortly after the November election. And so that's kind of a big deal.
Oh, gosh.
Okay.
Oh,
If
man,
Trump
so the
is
election's
in,
important.
Exactly. Trump can't quit until after the election. So if he stays in, they're going to quit. If he doesn't stay in, they're not going to quit. So keep an eye on that one. And presumably the same goes for us. I'm not 100% sure. So basically, in order to maintain our agreement there, we've got to keep... We've got to pledge to reduce our emissions, okay, because that's the entire point of the agreement. And pretty much everyone is like, right, the aim is zero net emissions by 2050. And that means you can emit a little bit, but you have to be drawing that down with trees or whatever. Okay, so essentially everyone's emitting zero by 2050. And this is pretty much where we have to be at in order for things not to get like extremely fucked. And honestly, they'll still be a little fucked, but that's the minimum.
Yeah, my understanding is the 2050 sort of zero. That's the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
But like, the next worst case scenario beyond just like catastrophic failure, feedback effects, everything's destroyed.
Well,
it's like, well, let's not go that far. Let's go as far as we can and bring it back one step.
Right. So zero by 2050 is kind of the compromise that people have sort of reached. And that's a very realistic and achievable thing.
What's the compromise between?
Well, I mean...
Like, I'm very cynical about this. So I'm like, what's the compromise between, like, dying and not dying is, like, this 50%, like, let's destroy everything.
Life support.
I keep telling you, climate change is not an on-off switch. It's a dimmer. So even better would be zero by 2040. But then everyone's like, oh, that's going to cost a lot of money. That's be hard. They would love to be zero by never. But obviously that's super bad. So everyone is kind of through a long process of economics going, oh, maybe zero by 2050.
What gets me is that I very clearly remember that when we were like in the 2000s, there was a lot of these goals were 2020. And so now we've pushed out the deadline yet again.
Yeah, look, I don't...
Oh, yeah, I don't think we're going to...
I don't remember what any specific goals are, but yeah, maybe. Different people have set different goals.
Yeah, it just feels like, okay, well, people are complaining about how expensive it's going to be for 2050, but... a lot of that expense could have been avoided.
Well, for sure. And honestly, we could have been zero some time ago. If we'd actually started taking climate action back in like the 80s and 90s, that would have meant a very like easy, cheap reduction in emissions. Now we're having to do a real steep reduction.
Yeah.
And so maybe zero by 2050 would have been hittable, you know, if we'd started a couple of decades ago for sure. And the longer we leave it, the longer we delay starting that downward slope, the steeper it has to become.
Yeah, it's like the longer you put off hitting the brakes,
yeah,
the harder you have to hit the brakes.
Yeah. That is absolutely the right analogy. Yeah, you slow down early and it's easier. So most states in Australia have gone, we're going to hit zero by 2050. That's a thing that we're aiming for quite independently, quite happily. Labor has said, yep, zero by 2050 sounds pretty good. The Liberals are not at all happy with it because they're like, what? Oh, but reducing emissions might cost some amount of money.
Yeah, I mean, it just buys into the fact that the Liberals and the Nationals fundamentally don't believe in climate change, that it's real. Like, even the ones that are like, oh, it's pretty important that we do something about climate change are just saying that because it's very unpopular to say it's not real anymore. And so they say that, like, oh, we need to do something, but anything that's put in front of them to do, they're just like, oh, but why do we have to?
Yeah. Not only, I think, do they not believe in it, they actively oppose action on climate change. Because if you say, well, even if climate change wasn't real, switching over to renewable energy would be cheaper, would make jobs, would do all these things, but they're ideologically opposed to it by now because they've fought against it for so long.
It's a toddler being told that they have to go to bed, and the parents are like, yeah, because if you don't go to bed, you're going to be a wreck. You have to go to bed. And the toddler is just like, but I'm fine. I'm up. I don't need to go to bed. I'm crying.
It's more like a toddler that's lying on the couch dead asleep, and the parent's like, you need to go to bed, and it's like, I'm not sleeping. You're already half in bed.
We will just carry you to bed. You will be more comfortable in bed.
And you drag them kicking and screaming, and then as soon as you put them down, they're down. They're asleep.
I'm not voting for that toddler again.
I don't have a toddler. I don't know how it works. I presume it's like that. So the government...
It's like a dimmer, Lang.
So the government has said, we don't know how much that'll cost. That's crazy. It could cost, what? $20 billion, which is as much as we give to fossil fuels every year. So what they're going to do instead is they've said, we'll have a technology investment target. See, we're not going to commit to reducing emissions. We are going to commit to spending the money, which may or may not reduce emissions. Now, the intention of the technology, presumably, is to reduce the emissions. By committing to any given technology or by committing a certain amount of money, that may or may not reduce emissions. If it doesn't reduce emissions, you're fucked up. If it does reduce emissions, then you're hitting your emissions target. So why are you pledging money instead of emissions? Because if you pledge emissions, you're going to be incentivized to do the cheapest, best way to do emissions. But spoiler, the cheapest, best way to reduce emissions is renewable energy.
Are you saying we should let the free market take care of this?
The free market would love to take care of this. So the free market, in this case, is represented by, you got this tech... I'm actually not 100% sure what he does. He's a billionaire. Mike Cannon-Brookes, Australian tech billionaire. Something to do with software.
He does software.
What's Atlassian do?
Like bug tracking software?
Jira.
So it's fiddly stuff.
It's project software.
He knows his tech and he knows money. So he's said, well, that's bullshit, as we all know. We have all the technology. You know, we've got solar, we've got wind, we can install it. He's been funding little solar-powered backup generators for bushfire-affected towns. So that instead of having to get diesel generators, they can get these really good kind of solar battery systems for like half the price. He's got them installed in like Cobargo and other joints. He's got a couple installed already. They're supplying power 24/7, and he's got 100 more that he says he can roll out relatively quickly. So that's the free market there. The free market is able to supply all this stuff. They would love a little bit of help.
Well, that's not the free market supply. No, that's a billionaire going, I've got so much money, I can do this very cheap, easy thing.
Okay.
Which should be that should be the purview of the local council, state government, and the federal government actually going, let's not rely on a billionaire. Let's just spend a minimal amount of money now to do the exact same fucking thing, as opposed to, well, this billionaire's putting in these solar panels as a cheap fix, but we're going to invest in finding super duper solar panels or some other technology.
Well, we have super duper solar panels.
It'll be
Technology
something.
already exists.
Okay. So free market is the giant battery in South Australia. Okay, that is making so much money back.
Yeah.
It is saving tons of cash. It is really helping the power system. The free market is AGL, like, just off their own bat, committing way more to batteries and solar in the future.
It's just because
it's cheaper.
Renewable's cheaper.
Yeah.
It's better.
It turns out once you make that initial investment, if you... Like, I'm a big money man. I don't know if you guys know that about me. But as far as I know, you've got to look a little less myopically at the initial investment and look at what you can make afterwards. And it seems like all the Liberal Party do is trot out the figures of like, right now it'll cost $20 billion. And they don't speak at all about the fact it's like, and in 3 years it'll make us 80 billion. We'll save 80 billion and we can invest that again in more good shit.
That's the thing. They're not even doing that because it is cheaper even in the short term. In the short term, do you know how much it costs to set up a new gas mining system? Oh, it's crazy. You can see return on that for decades. You get a return on your solar or wind or whatever so much faster.
Yeah.
That's the thing. That's the end of it. Like it's not a cost argument in the end. It's ideological.
It's ideological.
I think the Liberal Party or the conservatism in Australia sees renewable energy like with many of their other views, frozen at a point in time about 60 years ago.
Yeah.
Where they're like, we should invest in computers. We don't have a room the size of a library to put a computer in. It's like there's this fact that blows my mind every time I think about it, which is the team that invented solar panels have all died of old age.
There you go. Jesus.
Yeah.
Like they're not new. Solar panels were invented like in their sort of current form in the 50s.
Yeah.
And we have spent more time refining that technology than we have spent refining computer technology. Like think about how computer technology, how far that has come since 2010.
Yeah.
Like think about fucking hell.
I think, like, to put the tinfoil hat on for a second, I can honestly see, like, not to invoke the spectre of sports rorts, but I can feel it in my bones that what's going to happen is in 2 years' time, so a bunch of tech firms with like Liberal donating friends or ex-members of the Liberal Party or whatever are going to be the beneficiaries of all of this money. That's like, oh, we're investing in new technology.
They already are.
If it hasn't happened, it's already happening because this is like it's the same thing with like the jobs network. Like it's always just privatize things or make systems such so that the people that you know benefit from them.
Yeah, 100%.
So the Liberals had this emissions reduction scheme kind of thing where they were like, we're going to pay polluters to pollute less, but also if they feel like polluting more, we'll let them do that as well. We'll raise their pollution limits. So they can pollute as much as they want and we'll pay them for their good intentions. So that's what we've been doing. And spoiler, it's not been working great.
Wait, what?
Emissions have gone up.
Yeah, that's what they... In among all this, you'll hear the LNP, people like Angus Taylor or whoever is talking at any given time saying, but look, we're still reaching our goals. We're hitting our targets. We're going to be meeting whatever pathetic goals we're intending to meet. But if you actually look at their modelling, it all says we're going to be 50% renewables by 2030, which is explicitly the policy that they were trying to tear down. Everyone else was saying, let's get 50% renewables by 2030. And they were like, what, are you out of your minds? What about the coal mining jobs? Angus Taylor in 2019 said we had too many renewables. Too many. 25%. Too many renewables.
We need a renewables reduction
Oh,
fund.
boy. Yeah. They have it. It's called the entire budget.
It's called the Australian budget.
Anyway.
Whackity schmackity doo.
And I'll leave you with one last little renewables bit, which is that South Australia, due to a series of storms and things, has actually been cut off from the national power grid for about 3 or so weeks. Doing fine.
They're fully cut off, are they?
They are fully cut off from the Victorian
Holy
big
crap.
And they're just chugging away.
power line thing. South Australia is the state that built too many renewables and now their grid, it's too unreliable. It could go. They're relying on Victorian coal power. Nah, they're fine.
So for clarity, when you say they're disconnected from the grid, you mean that a whole bunch of states in Australia are connected to the same fossil fuel generation of electricity.
Yeah, there's kind of a backbone along the east coast so that, you can send a little bit of power from Victoria to New South Wales or to South Australia or whatever.
Yeah.
But because this is some really big friggin' high voltage power lines running through just a lot of countryside, that's a lot of power line where, it could be hit by a storm or something like that.
As it did in many years ago. And it was reported like the storm took out one of the backbone power lines.
This is why there was the initial calls, I think it was from Elon Musk, who wanted to buy batteries for South Australia because they were cut off and there was the entire state was in a blackout for at least a few days. I think it might have gotten close to a week.
It puts a lot of pressure on your grid. You and your various things all trip out and half the grid goes down and everyone who hated renewables went, it's probably because of the renewables.
It was
friggin'
absolutely
100%
renewables being blamed.
because of the renewables. It wasn't the renewables.
Because the storm took out the
And now the renewables have saved their ass.
I mean, the renewables are doing friggin' great. South Australia does have a certain amount of gas power, which is, also in use, but the renewables are in there serving just a big chunk of their needs. And if you hop on one of my favorite websites, which is electricitymap.org, you can see where different parts of Australia get their power from, and you'll see most of mainland Australia is like a dirty brown colour, like 75% coal most of the time. South Australia, kind of a light green colour because lots of renewables. So good job, you guys.
It's a pretty biased colour coding. Why can't they put it a lovely, nice brown?
A clean brown. I just like the idea
Beige.
that South Australia won't come back. So, we're ready to hook you back up.
Oh,
No.
yeah. Whenever you want. Yeah, sure.
Oh, come crawling back. Maybe you want some of our wind power.
Oh, you want to get hooked up to our renewables grid, do you? No, we
Is
want
there
you to be hooked up
renewables-
to the... Yeah.
Is there renewables also contributing to the main grid's electricity as well once they're connected up?
Yeah, when they're hooked up, it is.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we've got wind farms in Victoria and... Solar. Is there much solar in Victoria?
I mean, there is a decent, like mostly rooftop solar and
Oh,
a
sure,
few
of
little
course,
solar
yeah.
farms, but the majority of our power is from coal.
Okay.
And so when South Australia's hooked up, they might dilute that coal a little bit, but still we're a big power chunk there.
So Isaac's actually brought up the electricity map, and we've got New South Wales and Queensland, dark, dirty brown. We've got Victoria, slightly lighter. WA, actually a bit lighter than that. We've got Tasmania and South Australia, a bright yellow. And then just over the sea, the southern island of New Zealand is just a happy green.
New Zealand,
Classic New Zealand.
South Island and New Zealand's like 100% hydropower.
It's
So,
like, it looks like it's 140%.
I remember when I was in my teens and there was like a whole thing of like Australia versus New Zealand, like culture
Yeah.
war sort of thing. And now it's 2020 and everyone I know is just like, yeah,
no, they won that.
New Zealand's better.
Still reckon that's the way forward on any of these different policies if like Labor and the Greens want to push it through, is to just point at New Zealand and pull the Patriot card and just like appeal to nationalism by going, they're beating us in everything, even renewables, we're going to smash them. And then just that's how we get it through.
I don't know if the nationalism card works there, because what that would mean is you go, New Zealand's doing better in renewables, your hardcore patriots go, that means they're shit.
There's been a real strong thing of like renewables as sort of like coded weak and
Yeah.
like fossil fuels coded strong. It's like, oh, we've got big burly coal and bloody, oh, look at South Australia running on that wussy solar like
Can't cook a steak with your wind turbine.
it can. Just get it out of it, it's fine. Like
You can sous vide a steak quite easy. You're not making the case, McLean.
Coal-
You're not doing well.
Coal 1, nature 0.
Electric steak don't taste the same.
I like my planet like I like my steak. Well done.
Smoked. Brisked and jerkied. I've lost the metaphor. I'm hungry. Fuck.
Oh, yeah. And one more thing. They're friggin' still harping on about how much is it going to cost. Every time anyone brings it up, how much is it going to cost? I'm going to leave that there because we've demolished that one before.
I'm not. I'm going to pick
You're
it
not?
back up.
Okay,
No,
okay,
what
let's
I'm
go.
gonna-
We've demolished it in a previous episode. There's new listeners who
Yeah.
are not going to listen to the whole
How
bloody
much
back
does it
happen.
cost?
Yep.
What I want to ask is, when you said they're going to give $20 billion to this like technology bullshit fund.
No, they haven't actually said how much they're going to give, but that's just a big chunk of money they've already given a fossil.
No, sorry, you said it'll be $20 billion to fix, like to help us go renewable. And $20 billion is what we give to the coal industry. Would a compromise position, not to want to compromise, but like, wouldn't it just be effective, even just for the free market, to just take that $20 billion away from fossils? Not even put it into green stuff.
yeah.
Just take it away from them and put it into fucking, I don't know, medicine or education.
Oh, just put it in a vault.
Yeah, just there's a $20 billion surplus.
Honestly, that would be the same as $20 million of funding to not coal.
Well, that's what I mean. Like, wouldn't it work not just as well, but even like just take the subsidies away and we like, so all of a sudden solar's real fucking attractive.
At least wean them off the subsidies, for God's sake.
I mean, that's what we said in the last episode of like that. Like, why can't we take the $20 million of subsidies away? And they're like, oh, because the fuel workers will be out of jobs. Like, well,
Yeah.
I mean, if we take this $20 billion away from the fossil fuels,
Give them
check
each
it out.
$1 million.
We just came into $20 billion.
The market's decided.
We've got some fossil fuel workers out of work.
Yeah.
Well, here's a fund.
State pension.
And honestly, there's something that just really pisses me off about subsidizing a profitable industry.
Yeah.
Like, people are making profit out of coal. That means you've got leftover money, which means why are we subsidizing you? We're just paying your profit.
Yeah, but they wouldn't be profitable otherwise.
I mean, our government is
Is it more
Do it.
public?
Do it. Let's see if this works.
So the government ostensibly spends money so that things can happen, but the whole point of subsidies is to direct what things are happening. Like the government massively subsidizes private schools because they're just like, well, we want more people to be going private schools than public schools. And so private schools get more subsidy than public schools, even though that is
Crazy.
demonstrably stupid because public schools don't
Need the money.
make that's the whole point of private versus public. But public schools in Australia get less government funding than private schools do. It's the same with fossil fuels. They're just ideologically committed to fossil fuels. They look at the world and they're like, what the world needs is people burning fossil fuels, and what the world doesn't need is people using renewable energy.
Yeah.
Just there's no practical consideration to it. It's just like we put the money where we want things to be happening, and they want things to be happening in fossil fuels because that's like they think that fossil fuels are good because they're rich bastards and they hang out with other rich bastards. And so you can have renewable energy lobbyists coming and visiting MPs and explaining the science, and then they go home and they are just having dinner with their mates, and all of their mates are fossil fuel executives.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, so-and-so this afternoon was telling me that actually renewables are cheaper. And every single one of their mates at dinner is like, nah, that guy doesn't know what he's talking about. And they're like, well, I mean, these people are my friends, so I'm going to trust them.
Or that guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Can you fix that for us? So yes, we'll help you with subsidy.
It's the same thing you were saying before, Tom, about the numbers don't matter. It's ideology.
Yeah.
And one of the problems that we have in Australia in particular is relying on people to appeal to common sense. So you see it in other things like, oh, okay, well, let's listen to the scientists because they know they've got to be right about that. The average person, okay, you might think that some of them are going to listen to scientists, but most of the time they're just going to listen to told what is right, not necessarily basing that on any numbers.
Yeah.
And it's at that point, it's just a propaganda war.
Common sense is the stupidest fucking idea in any field. As soon as somebody says common sense, just never listen to that person again because it means instinct.
And if
right? It means what I reckon. And if somebody was running for political office, being like, I'm just gonna policy-wise, I'm just gonna follow my instinct. I'm just gonna go with my gut. I'm not gonna listen to anyone. That's what common sense is about.
And we should point out also that most of the Australian population does think climate change is real and does think we need more renewables. So it's not even that most people have been deceived or ripped off or propagandized, although often they have to a degree, but also the government's just not listening to us anyway.
Yeah, it's also like the majority of Australians support drastic action on climate, and a lot of what the government does is like, we've just funded up a big new coal power plant, and that is strong action on climate because with this big new coal power plant, we'll be able to fund we'll be able to power a renewable transition over the next 30 years, which we have no plans of doing, but
we could.
Thank God we've got this big new power plant. They just do whatever they want.
What if
yeah, that's great. That's going to reduce emissions by a ton.
And when they say we're going to look into technology, they mean technology that allows them to use more coal. They do not want technology that already exists because that doesn't need research. It just needs installation.
We have the technology. We have it. We already have it. Anyone who's looking for new technology is just looking for different technology that, if they can find a way to still make money off fossil fuels that somehow reduces emissions, that's what they're looking for. And until they find it, they're just going to keep burning fossil fuels.
I just realised this is like the second stage. Like, you know how we were talking about in a previous episode about how the changing language from deniers and people like Bolt about climate change. So in the past, Bolt has been like the science has been the science hasn't been settled. That was the line. And of course, we know the science has been settled on global warming. Now it's we don't have the technology or the technology is too expensive.
Oh, yeah, they just run on this massive lag where the science has been settled for ages and they're like, well, we got to wait for the science to settle. And then the technology is completely adequate and they're like, well, I mean, now the science is settled, but we've got to wait until the technology
Yeah.
Dear.
Boy. I mean, we look at all the states actually having sensible targets to hit zero net emissions by 2050, which means the federal policy is kind of irrelevant. If every single state is already committing to that, then at a national level, like, it doesn't really matter because it's happening at a state level.
The main thing is...
what's going to happen is we're going to, at the state level, implement completely renewable stuff, and that's going to be finished, and then the federal government's going to be like, we'll have to wait until the infrastructure is complete.
Yeah, I've got a question for Lang specifically. I don't know if you know or if there is a massive difference, but could we potentially have a situation where every state is even on target to go as carbon neutral as the state can go, but we can still have a federal government not being on track to reduce emissions to carbon neutrality? So what I mean is, if like we've got, Australians' emissions are exorbitantly high because of Adani, wouldn't then also Queensland's emissions be high because of Adani? And so if Queensland comes down, Australia federally has to come down?
Yeah, it all depends how you calculate these things because, if hypothetically all of the states individually lowered their emissions, those emissions combined are our national emissions. We don't actually count coal exports as belonging to any given state or even belonging to the whole country, where we really, really should because they're our responsibility. But
we made them.
Yeah, we did. We dug them up and we sold them. It's like guns or drugs. Kind of, we're a bit responsible. Australia's emissions could be entirely lowered by the states just acting. And if, honestly, Queensland decided not to have Adani or whatever, that would lower our exports as well. The thing is, though, we'd be doing the whole thing with the federal government actively spending our budget against us, taking taxpayer money from all of those states, using it to fight against those states' like renewable energy targets, throwing billions and billions of our money at profitable fossil mining companies. And that's the thing. That's what pisses me off is we don't want to have to drag them kicking and screaming while they're actively using our own money to kill us. That's... Yeah. So just because all of the states have the right intentions, it doesn't mean that the federal government isn't really, really harmful.
Yeah. 2020, pay no taxes.
Oh, look. I don't want to go out and say that, but hey,
hold on, Mitch. There's a lot of valuable stuff that your tax dollar goes to, like refugee internment camps,
those French submarines,
those private schools,
holidays to Hawaii. All right.
Yeah, bribes,
sports clubs,
gifts to friends,
internet.
Let's just list this until Lang has to leave.
What's that? I'm done. We can start talking about a different...
Oh, yeah. No, I was just noticing that it is. Yeah. You probably do have to go pretty
actually,
soon.
I'll wrap up.
I'll
you guys
insert a musical sting here. But the thing is, being right feels amazing. And so if you start looking out for that stuff and being like, hold on a second, the coalition's talking about a new reason why we shouldn't act on climate change. I bet that's bullshit.
Yeah.
Hey, Evie, I bet that's bullshit. And then, of course, it's bullshit.
Yeah.
You get that.
Yeah, you get the rush.
It's a sense of power in knowing, yes, I understand why this is just a load of shit.
Yeah.
I can see where all the failure points are. And I mean, that in itself is like, that's an action in itself. Like you're already...
need to teach our listeners sanctimony.
Fuck yes.
So speaking of, dirty solidarity.
All right.
The other one we wanted to hit. McLean, do you want to give us a rundown? Or me too?
Oh, yeah. So dirty solidarity is the idea that we, humanity, are all in this together. And if we don't do something about climate change, then we're all equally fucked. Except for the few billionaires who have bought up bunkers in New Zealand and a few other places. So we do need to have solidarity with other people who are fighting that same fight. And that means that some of the people that we need to say, yes, we are on your side, you are on our side, we're on the same side, are going to be really shitty people or even kind of shitty people. Like, solidarity is important. And dirty solidarity is just as important. And dirty solidarity is acknowledging that some of the solidarity that you're going to have is going to be with people who you don't like.
And sometimes they might be good people, but they just have beliefs that are not necessarily great, that are formed by being, let down by people who they thought were going to be okay. Like, who,
for sure.
Who for years have said, the science is right. This is like, we can prove it with facts, but they've still been let down by those people. So they're just going to go to who listens to them.
Yeah. And I think there's a thing of when I have a friend who has an opinion that I disagree with, immediately I'm just like, all right, but why do they have this bad opinion? And I sort of like think to myself about like why they're like, even though I don't agree with it, how they might have come to it so that I can still be friends with them because they're my friend and I don't want to be like, oh, you are so wrong about this one thing. I'm cutting you off. We don't instinctively do that with people that we don't know. And so everyone in the world who has an opinion that we don't agree with, even like the most horrible, horrible opinions, they got that opinion from their upbringing or their context. Like people aren't born evil.
No man is an island.
And so I think if you embrace the idea of dirty solidarity, then you're starting in an easier position. So somebody can say something horrible, and if you're like, oh, but why did they have this opinion? What led them to that? Then after you've done that process, you can be like, now I understand where they're coming from. Solidarity's back on. I don't think that they're horrible.
Yeah.
But if you say, no, dirty solidarity is important, somebody says something horrible, you say, we're still on the same side here.
Yeah.
Then you start doing that work, but you don't turn off the solidarity switch. You're not like, well, solidarity pending for you until I've figured out how you arrived at this disagreeable opinion.
Yeah.
Dirty solidarity is leaving the switch on while you figure out how they arrived there.
Yeah.
I think that's the distinction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, so for the context,
where's this coming from?
So for the context of it, you might remember Paul Parker, who is the fiery volunteer out in the bush who very passionately told Scott Morrison to go and get fucked.
Get fucked from Nelligan.
We love doing this shit. He had a very impassioned rant, rightly so, against the Prime Minister. And as you can expect, most of the country got behind him on that because even if you are intensely right-wing, I think just ingrained in this country is a love of telling people to get fucked, especially if they're in positions of authority.
Yeah.
Recently, though, Chris Ullman, who is the political editor at 9 News, sent out a tweet, which is sort of what Ullman does every so often, is he agitates from the right wing by sort of going, oh, well, the left aren't going to like this. And the tweet that he sent out was, remember your hero Paul Parker, who told Scott Morrison to get fucked? Well, turns out he's a supporter of One Nation and Pauline Hanson. And he had this footage of Paul Parker saying that Pauline Hanson's the only person who likes the country. If you don't know who Hanson is, that's for the best. But
yeah, she's a grifter politician who is very racist.
Yeah, and she runs like a hard right party called One Nation. Yeah. And she was around in the 90s talking about Asians, went to jail for a bit, and then came back and is now saying the exact same things, but instead of it being about Asians, it's about Muslims.
She didn't go to jail for racism, though. She went to jail for fraud.
Yeah. Which some people
on a technicality.
Yeah, which was set up by Tony Abbott. Which is, if you are getting set up by Tony Abbott, it's fucked. But so
yeah, when I call her a grifter, that's like convicted grifter.
Yeah. And so a bunch of people, I mean mainly online, but a bunch of people sort of had the take that now for some reason Paul is bad. Because it turns out he's a One Nation.
Not that many people. There's going to be people who are concerned trolling about it who are like, well, he's, been milkshake ducked now.
Yeah.
But it wasn't.
Milkshake duck being a meme that just means somebody said something horrible and so we can't listen to them anymore is
essentially.
Yes.
Yep.
But it was still a very small minority. It was mostly like people in reply to Chris going, well, so what are you implying by this tweet? And especially
back it the fuck up. Like if you're gonna make a point, Aren't you a journalist? Oh no, I'm a journalist.
Yeah, I'm just saying.
You're not going to like this one, are you? Well, I'm not going to like this one. You're a dickhead.
So most people have generally been, look, that's not great. It's not great that he's a One Nation supporter, but at the same time, he's still making the correct point.
Yeah.
And of course,
because he supports a racist politician
doesn't
mean
him
that Scott Morrison shouldn't go and get fucked. It doesn't mean that the stuff that he said about firefighters not deserving compensation because they want to be out there. That's really wrong.
And of course, then the most Chris Ullman move ever, which is that after he had a couple of people saying, "Oh, I guess he's racist now," decided to write an entire article about how the left were intolerant of different views, and they've decided to shit all over this guy for being a One Nation supporter and how we're never going to get ahead in this country as a result. Which is, it's still like he's complaining about there not being dirty solidarity, but I think there is. I think most people still agree, like, oh, okay, it's not good, but come into our tent anyway and we'll try and tell you how One Nation is bad.
It's a real thing. So when he first released that sort of scoop that Paul Parker was a One Nation supporter, like I did have this sort of sinking feeling of like, oh God, like this poor firefighter who, by the way, the whole reason that his rant went viral was not because like nobody was saying ScoMo should go and get fucked. It was because he was on the front lines of the bushfire crisis. He personally fought the bushfires until the point of physical collapse. Straight after that video was taken, the very follow-up clip is him lying on the ground with other people.
I didn't know that.
That was the same guy.
Yeah.
He physically collapsed from exhaustion after that clip.
Yeah.
Because he had been fighting the fucking bushfires non-stop. Like, I don't give a shit what political party he votes for. The man is a hero. Personally fighting the bushfires, one of the worst crises Australia's ever faced. Like, I was in my apartment basically the whole time. I was looking at some videos of some bushfires. They were looking pretty scary. I was not collapsing from exhaustion after having fought them 24/7 for... God,
Yeah.
I'm so mad that people would be like, oh, I got a scoop on the person you're quote unquote hero. Like, fuck you, Chris Ullman. You go into the bushfires with no equipment. That's your destiny.
I guess the thing I want to take out from this is that criticizing this guy for being a One Nation supporter at this point is just aesthetics. You're literally just focusing on the thing that does not matter in the scheme of things that matter. And if you're going to do that and think that, okay, well, we shouldn't listen to this guy as a result, then you're not seeing the forest for the trees. You're going to lose.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, we probably shouldn't listen to him about race. Like, he's bought into Pauline Hanson's bullshit. He's probably super, super wrong about race, which probably means Pauline Hanson's main angle of attack is economy stuff. Like, oh, I'm telling lies about the economy by saying that your financial situation's bad because of brown people or whatever. Like, he's probably wrong about economy stuff as well.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that, like, holy shit, Australia owes him one for fighting the fires, and it doesn't mean that he's not like a valuable person.
But the thing is as well is that when you listen to at least that clip, he's not even talking about how Hanson's the only one that's right on race or economy or whatever. He just goes, she's the only one that understands the bush and us, and she's welcome anytime, because she's also one of the only politicians, and we're seeing this worldwide, that is speaking to the fact that people are concerned, not speaking to specific concerns.
Yeah.
Hanson and Trump and Le Pen and everyone else are really good at saying, you feel bad, don't you? You feel worried? You feel scared? I know why. I can help you. As opposed to both sides of central parties that sort of go, well, yes, there are some problems, but overall things are going great and we can fiddle with some numbers and fix you right up. It's like, no, you feel afraid and I have your back. And that's what the right wing are doing so much of. That he probably doesn't know most of her costed policies on immigration and whatnot.
Sure, no way.
He just sees her on Sunrise going, Australians and Bush are doing it tough.
Yeah.
And I listen to him. And he goes, she listens to me.
Yeah, and she does.
One thing that came up in previous elections where Pauline Hanson has contested, she and people from her party go out into the bush. They talk to people and they do it way more than either of the other major parties or even the Greens.
Yeah, they don't force handshakes on people either.
It's pretty likely that Pauline Hanson is the one politician that
has
Paul
visited
Parker's
that guy's
actually
electorate.
met.
Yeah. So, sort of like to take a sort of step back from it, like in a bigger sort of view, there is a genuine worry though, like how far does dirty solidarity go?
Yeah.
Because you can do one of two things. You can either sort of say that we can't allow anyone who disagrees with us whatsoever, or you can say, well, we admit degrees. We sort of have to let some bad people in and exclude some bad people. And when you start talking about degrees, you start talking about grey area and it gets sort of difficult. But the good thing about solidarity, and the good thing about the solidarity that we want, the type of like socialist climate change solidarity, is that it's self-selecting. Because what we want is good health, good education, good work, solid future for everyone.
For everyone.
And when you give that to people, I reckon Paul would go, yeah, I want everyone to be safe. So he's allowed in the tent. But if there is someone so ideologically opposed to Muslims or blacks or women getting that type of support, then they're fucking self-selected out anyway.
Yeah.
They don't get into this solidarity because they're willing to go, no, I don't want to work with people if black people don't get healthcare. Good, fuck off. You're not part of this.
Yeah.
But if someone's going to go, look, One Nation is probably the only party I'd vote for because they want healthcare for everyone. Sweet. Yeah. Actually, we want healthcare for everyone, and Hanson's not going to fucking give it to you. So you go out with outreach. Yeah. You don't actually have to worry about the wrong people coming in when you exercise critical dirty solidarity.
The reason why I think a lot of libs are so mad at us having solidarity with this guy is because they've gotten the wrong end of the stick for so long when it comes to having a big tent. They think, well, we're going to reach out to these people, but we have to compromise on their terms. So we're going to let go of some of our beliefs. It's like the tweet I've called up before where you turn back look at the audience when you turn the dial to more racist.
Yeah.
But dirty solidarity means you don't compromise on your own beliefs in welcoming people in who you may not agree with.
Yeah.
It's like, here is our agenda. You can like it or not, but we're here for you and we're going to fight for you.
Yeah.
Look at all these great things you could have if you changed your mind.
You deserve healthcare, a roof over your head, food on the table, no matter how much of a dickhead you are.
Exactly.
No matter how much I disagree with you on anything.
It's a blanket rule. Yeah. Literally everyone.
Everyone.
And you know what? I'm not fighting for the racists, but they'll fucking get it anyway.
Yeah.
I'm fighting for everyone.
That's how that works with everyone. I'm also fighting for the children of billionaires.
Yeah.
Oddly enough, I don't give a shit because there's heaps more people that aren't children of billionaires that will benefit.
It's like the thing, it's how you fight back against like people who say, oh, but do you want to give Medicare for all or do you want to give free uni or things to people who are rich? It's like, okay, everyone gets it. That's the whole point.
It's the same reason why I want welfare, even though there are some small minority of people that take advantage of it now. Yes, that's okay. That'll just happen. There are literally the dole bludgers that we're scared of. It's a very small percentage, but even if it was higher, fucking whatever. There's still more people that need it.
Yeah.
Also, there's no dole bludgers who I actually get like a little bit more out of Centrelink because I figured out like this neat little scam. I know nobody like that.
Yeah.
Who is also just like, holy shit, that guy's rich. Like, like if the way that you're getting a little bit of cream on the top is through like dole scamming. You're still not doing great.
Yeah.
Also, just want to point out, rich people already do that. They already have solidarity and figuring out their own scams for skimming off the top. So they're just against the fact that poor people might have a slightly easier way. So they're scared of poor people scamming the system when they're all scamming it themselves already.
It's exactly the same scam as like funneling a dummy corporation through the Cayman Islands, except you're doing it for $50 a month. Like,
it's just there's nothing really to worry about. Like if there are people that are skimming on the dole, it's a non-issue. And you know how I know it's a non-issue? It's because fucking David Koch on Sunrise said it was a non-issue. and he's the economy guy. But like, if that guy can actually say that, no, this isn't an issue, we need to be looking after people and we need to raise welfare. Like, okay. Yeah. Good.
It's also the thing of like, as soon as you've got a program that is means tested, you need to employ somebody to test the means of that program. So if you're like, look, we've got this welfare payout that only goes to people who are earning under blah, blah, blah amount of dollars or have XYZ in their bank account, you now need an infrastructure that checks that how much people are making money and like receives that reporting and liaises with the banks and that sort of thing. And those people are going to draw a salary, and those people need an office to work in and an internet connection and an air conditioner. And that means that the program that you're running to make sure that you don't pay a couple of people a couple of dollars extra, you put more money into that than you would if you just let them take a fucking couple of dollars extra.
Exactly.
The way it sort of works is it's sort of counterintuitive, but it is sort of a hidden thing. But like, as an extreme example, like a UBI, but on your example, McLean, if you have like $1 for $1, we just give everyone $1. But then if you've got like bank checkers, then all of a sudden every dollar that you give to people also comes with an extra dollar. So it costs $2 to give that $1 to someone. But then you have some more infrastructure on top of it because you need those people to have offices. So welfare starts to cost more the more you're trying to reduce the cost of it. Yeah. Healthcare costs more if you also, like for every $4 you spend on people, you're actually spending $8 to make sure that second person doesn't get healthcare. Yeah. It's ridiculous. Just give everyone healthcare.
Yeah. That example that you gave, the second one that you gave, is exactly a large part of why the US private healthcare system is so expensive. There's so much additional administration costs that they just put on the top of it.
Oh, yeah.
That has made that blowout. That's like when people just go to hospital because they've broken their leg. They have to pay like $100,000 because all of that is just the admin costs to like pretend to lower their insurance.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like the medical insurance companies in the States and in Australia are very, very rich companies. And if you're a medical insurance company and you're making a profit, the only way that you can make a profit is by not giving people healthcare. Like the money comes in, the function of your company is to give people healthcare. The money comes in, a little bit of money comes out, giving people healthcare. The rest of it, not giving people healthcare. And if you're making a bunch of profit, that means it's a bunch of healthcare that you're not giving people. All insurance is a scam.
That's this podcast's official line. Yeah. All insurance is a scam. Okay, so one thing I wanted to get into then is what does it mean for dirty solidarity? I guess looking at something like Pauline Hanson, what her appeal is, one thing that she's really good at, as you said, Mitch, is that she's really good at saying there's no reason to feel shame. There's nothing wrong with you. I'm scared too. And that is a large reason for her popularity now because she's figured out that thing that, you know, people who don't get talked to by politicians like one-on-one and listened to and feel like they're being patronised, they don't have that connection of someone saying, really listening and saying, I feel your pain and I understand why you're scared that you're going to lose your livelihood. Yeah. So, of course, I guess that's the lesson for the left in Australia is to say, how do we reach out to people and tell them there's nothing wrong with you, it's not your fault, this is how we can change it. And everyone, all these people are in the same boat with you. It's not just you're isolated and you're the silent Australian. All the people in Australia, like 96% of people, are all in the same boat with you.
Yeah.
Oh, I forgot. So, I mean, for me, you might want to edit this out. This might be too in the weeds, but like. A big problem with the inner city left, I mean, it's more of a problem for us because we're very online. But even you do start to see it with like an Adam Bant type.
Yeah.
New leader of the Greens. But the commentators on the right do sort of lean into this as well. But there is a fundamental sort of tension between identity politics and socialism on two ends of the spectrum. And so essentially you've got on one end, identity politics sort of saying every slight against you is a political issue and needs to be persecuted politically. And so that's when you get the left sort of eating themselves and like personal slights turn into these like big, like you can't say that because I'm X or you shouldn't say that because you're Y, blah, blah, blah. And I don't think that happens too much outside of the extremes of the left, but right-wing commentators talk about how that happens a lot more than it does. They will talk about how, you can't say anything because, I can't say that because I'm a white man, not a black woman. Apparently that's going to be an issue. They love hammering that and scaring people.
Caricature of the left, yeah.
Yeah. On the other end of the spectrum, I don't think we need to go this far, but on the other end of the spectrum is essentially communism saying, you're just a worker. You are nothing but a worker. Shut up. Get in the trenches with all the other workers. And so the tension between those two is essentially, do I politically align with someone who I'm saying, well, they personally don't sit well with me? That's a political issue. You do kind of have to let in some dirty solidarity and be like, I disagree with you politically on this end. But that's more of a personal disagreement because what's more important right now is that I'm a worker getting fucked, or I'm a worker not being listened to, or I'm a volunteer firefighter not being listened to. And it turns out it doesn't really matter about these smaller identity-based grievances that I have because my wages are stagnant, because nothing's been done on climate change, because politicians aren't listening to me. And so this is the other thing as well. We're fucking rational beings. We can split the difference. We don't have to go 100% like identity politics or 100% communism. We can sort of go, actually, it's super important to recognise the plebiscite. That's not just id-pol gone mad. Gay people should probably get married. I'm going to allow that. Like, we can think about these things with common sense.
I'm going to propose a new rule, which is you've got to have solidarity with people. And then if they say something that's getting them cancelled or like, that's really like, that's pretty racist or sexist or that sort of thing, like you are allowed to call them out about that, but you are only allowed to do it over a lunch or dinner that you have bought them. You're allowed to say whatever you want. Hey, man, I'm going to take you out for dinner. We're going to talk about why that was a real fucked thing to say. And then, like, go crazy at that dinner.
Also, I reckon if they're on the other side of the country, like, just put something in the notes for their Deliveroo. Like, you can order them something, and so long as you send them a Facebook message or tweet at them, but you
Dude, that was fucked up.
you had to buy them a meal. Speaking of solidarity, call-outs, cool call-out stuff.
Oh, yeah.
I was on a podcast called Fuck You Tarot Lady a little while ago.
Oh, so good.
Yeah, it was really fun.
That's pretty funny.
Rory had me on. It's a really cool podcast. You pull out a tarot card to start with and like read that out, and it really like sets a cool mood for the entire show. I got the ranting, raving, loud guy, like the Knight of Swords.
Gee, weird that.
But yeah, no, it ended up being a fucking 2-hour podcast. It was really cool, and I got to sort of let loose instead of worrying about like hitting talking points on research stuff. I was like, here's my uninformed opinion.
Do you finally believe astrology is real now?
Yes. Yeah,
Sweet.
100%. From tarot cards are bullshit, but astrology, 100%.
Cool. Download CoStar.
No.
Is that the actions for this one?
Yes.
No. Another cool call out, just coincidentally enough, the talk on common sense being a bullshit talking point was covered really well in the last episode of Citations Needed. Really good podcast if you haven't heard it. Two geniuses essentially go through and pick apart media talking points and just let you know why things are bullshit. It's great.
All right.
And the last one, Bunta Vista, Australia's other political podcast. There's only two.
They're the big one. Finally helping out the little guy.
Yeah. If you want yet more Australian political news, info, and riffing, Bunta Vista is on the podcast to check out. So, actions this week, the really important stuff. If you have power or electricity at your home, consider changing it to a provider that is green. So you can go to energymadeeasy.gov.au and you can find the suppliers that will get you green power.
Yeah, and it's not even about getting greens. Like, I mean, definitely do that, but it's cheaper. Like, it's the same stuff as the renewable tech. Like, it happens at the small scale as well. If you're with AGL or Origin, you're paying too much on your electricity bill and it's going to coal. Switch away, you'll save some bucks, and the whole planet individually. Just you changing that one electricity bill, whole planet's saved, climate change is fixed.
Yeah. We're waiting for you to change it. We'll walk the podcast up. Here's the thing as well. I don't know, we should probably repeat this. We're shutting this podcast down as soon as Australia starts taking proper action on climate change. So if you just change your power now, there won't be next week's episode. We'll be done.
Yeah.
Pay us to stop talking.
We'll even give up this bit where we talk for way too long.
Also, join your union. Even if you're unemployed, there is the Australian Unemployed Workers Union. Get involved in your union, start agitating for change that way.
Yep.
Other things you can do just on the small scale, which like every little bit can sort of help. Be sure to get into online bullying. When you see a right-wing commenter mention something that's bullshit, if you've learned something from this episode, shoot a link to the episode in their reply and say, actually, what you're saying is wrong. I think you might be lying, and here's how I know this. It's because I heard it on Not Good Enough. And also, don't be abusive. But call your local member, call a particular politician that you disagree with, call the Prime Minister's office, leave a message. They do actually have to pass those messages on. It's not bullshit. They don't get thrown out. They do pass them on. If one person calls up, that's a blip. That's nothing. If 50 people call up in a day for something, that's pretty intense. If they get 1,000 calls through, they turn the phones off, and that feels really good.
It's also, you've got to factor in that you will be standing in opposition to the people who are already calling that MP. And imagine the kind of people who regularly calls their MP. That's the kind of person that's already calling their MP. And you need to, like, the more you call your MP, the more of a percentage that you are and the less of a percentage that these, like, horrible old racists that we all have solidarity with.
And fade out.
Yeah. One other thing you can do is just sort of sit down by yourself, have a think about who you know that is also worried about climate change, or, you know, lefty or a greenie or a union advocate or any of those sort of things. Just make a little mental list of who all those people are and then start a group chat with them and say, what are we doing?
Talk to people.
Yeah, talk to people and make those connections. That's how this podcast got started, and it's how all organising in history has happened.
Yeah.
It's by people getting together and saying, what are we doing? Let's do something.
And legit, that's not you being flippant. Like, the idea of radical coffee shops was literally leftists were meeting in the city for coffee, and the groups just got bigger and bigger as people were leaning over to other tables, overhearing conversations from lefties going, Oh, yeah, we hate that too. Yeah. So like the amount of people that post about like, well, when's the revolution? When are we getting on the street? You would be surprised how often people just want someone else to take the first step and they start marching every other step along the way.
And nobody's coming to save you. It's all of you. You have to do it for yourself.
You don't think about like, oh, which organization can I join to be part of the movement? Think about who do I know, and then maybe there is an organization that you guys can join. But if you all join them together, you'll be a lot more motivated to actually go and do that stuff. It's the same as like joining a gym or doing any of that stuff. If you've got a buddy, everything is a lot easier. You are much more likely to actually carry on with it. So just approach that, like take that same approach with politics and climate. Just find your friends who are into that stuff and say, what are we doing? And they find their friends, and then we got a big movement on our hands.
we got a cult. Oh no.
Hey, thanks for listening to Not Good Enough. We're experimenting with the format a little bit, so you might notice that this episode has been a bit more sort of ranty and unstructured in the second half and a bit more factually in the first half. I don't really know what the stats on the other episodes. But as we sort of experiment and try and change things up, like we really, really need to know what our listeners think. So absolutely get in touch via @NotGoodPod on Twitter or notgoodpod@protonmail.com, or we've got show notes and other contact information at notgoodpod.com. Thanks for listening. Not Good Enough is recorded on the lands of the Kulin Nation. We pay our respects to the elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded.